Chris, thanks for saying yes to taking part.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me one thing that you're good at?
I am good at analyzing and breaking down systems.
And when you're good at analyzing and breaking down systems, what kind of systems are those systems?
All systems really. I start well, so probably background computer science,
Mm-hmm.
programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are all system based.
Yeah.
And then moved into home inspections from there. So inspecting a house, houses are built by systems. You have a roofing system, you have the framing system. Everything is a system.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving from there, moved into hypnosis and therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And humans
Mm-hmm.
are all run by systems,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it was just a logical progression of the descent down the rabbit hole and discovering that everything pretty much runs by a system. And I just have a really, really good knack. Maybe you almost find it fun and interesting
Mm-hmm.
to analyze, break down the systems, and then be able to regurgitate these systems in a way that makes it so people can understand them.
Okay.
Right? Because I mean, you can grab a book of the building code
Mm-hmm.
and read that if you can stay awake.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody comes over to you and says, okay, look, you just think of it like this, and all of a sudden roofing makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? The whole waterproofing membrane and everything makes sense of how a roof actually works as a system to keep
Mm-hmm.
water out of your
Mm-hmm.
house, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just as a quick aside, this is my notebook. This is why I look down here sometimes while we're talking
Cool.
together. If you get
I
get
got I got my
confused
own
about
piece of
that,
I got my own piece of paper.
that's good. Okay. So when you're analyzing and breaking down these systems, you're saying you find that it's fun and interesting to break the systems down.
Yeah.
And then after that, you regurgitate them so that other people can understand how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is both the analyzing, but there's also the then giving to other people as part of this process of breaking these systems down.
Yeah, and that's where that opposite side comes from is mostly giving back what you know,
Mm-hmm.
sharing of information,
Mm-hmm.
right? That could probably be linked back to the monkey brain that we all have, right? The need to share and communicate information between each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? um but yeah, it's like a game, right?
Yeah.
And it's very game like and
Mm-hmm.
interesting, like when I think about all the things that I've gone through. So programming, every single time you program something, it's going to be different. You're going to have different challenges. You're going to have different, you're using kind of the same system, but the systems have to be built differently in order to give you the final product that somebody's looking for. So everything's different.
Mm-hmm.
I look at home inspections. When I used to do that, every house I'd walk into was the system is the same, but the house wasn't built the same. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's my job to go through, look at these systems and find out where the errors are.
Mm-hmm.
People are not built the same, right? We all have different experiences. So
Mm.
therefore, I have to go in and I know what the systems look like. And then I have to look for, again, errors in the system
Mm-hmm.
as to why they're not operating the way that they believe that they should be operating,
Mm.
right? Where the issues are. So, a lot of my success comes from the ability to explain to clients, and this is all levels, right? From start of computer systems all the way down to therapy, is my ability to explain to people in a way that they're like, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand something, it makes it a lot easier to notice it, to understand it, and to in the case of a house, right? If I say, hey, you're grading on the outside. I don't know, do you have basements out there?
Yes, we do.
You have basements. All right. So grading. Grading is very important for basements because it moves water away from the concrete.
Mm.
So if you explain that to somebody and why, and you don't have to get into structural engineering and cracks and foundations and all that stuff. You just say like, hey, if you do this, you're less likely to get water in your basement. It's an important thing to people and homeowners.
Mm.
So they're more likely to go outside their house and say, oh, you know what, the grading is not good. Maybe I should do that if I care about this. You
Mm.
do that with therapy, and it's like, okay, the reason that you're responding in this way is because of this, right? So if you don't want to do that, here's, a couple things that you can do. And now it's up to them, right?
Mm.
I'm not going to go back to these people's houses and be like, oh, your grading sucks, here's a ticket, or you're getting a fine. The same
Mm.
thing with people, if they're having a panic attack, I can help them, but they have to help themselves,
Mm.
right? So if you explain the situations, you explain the system, why it's happening, and my understanding of the system and understanding of their system and why it's happening to them and what exactly they need to fix that system, and
Mm.
then telling them that in a way that they understand,
Mm.
now it's up to them. Is it important enough?
Mm.
Right? Is your dry basement important enough for you to go out and buy 50 bags of dirt and put it around your house? Is spending some time doing some self check-ins and maybe some breathing exercises and maintaining your stress and tension levels, is that worth it to you to not have panic attacks anymore, right?
Mm. Okay. I'm going to come back to the explanation and that part of it a little bit later, if that's okay. I'd like to just come back to this fun and interesting game that you talk about when you're analyzing
Yeah,
systems.
yeah.
If you think back to a time when you've been really involved in this fun and interesting game, what kind of fun is that fun you're having in this game?
Well, that's a really great question. Kind of fun because it's entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's new. We all like that. We all like the feeling of something new.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess the fun is knowing that it's not repetitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to work, and even though I'm doing the same job, I'm not doing the same thing,
Yeah.
right? You take somebody who does, and I guess the fun is the system itself, because you talk to a bookkeeper, they're like, well, yeah, I'm doing the books and I do the same thing every month, and some of the expenses are the same, but some of them are not, right? And sometimes
Mm.
I get this oddball expense that keeps me on my toes, and they find that to be entertaining and fun, the slight nuances.
Mm.
And I guess that would be it. The fun is in the nuances, and
Mhm.
what I've chosen to do happens to have way more of them,
Mhm.
right? Rather than the one or two, like, oh, there might be a curveball here and there. It's literally every single time I work with somebody, every single time I go into a house, every single time I code something, it is completely new and different and offers its own challenges and rewards,
Mhm.
right? So I guess that would be the fun, would be the extremity of the nuances of
Yeah.
differences between them all. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the new, the entertainment. It's not repetitive. There are these extremes of nuances you mentioned, and it's also challenging and rewarding that
Yes.
every time you come to this, regardless of what field it's in, there's this new system to look at and explore. And you said as well the system kind of was the fun, if I heard
Well,
that right.
yeah. So analyzing the system, because once you know how the system works, so you can only build a house in so many different ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the building code.
Mm.
So if you would need, if you're going to build something that's completely new and different, you'd have to get exceptions to the building code,
Mm.
which means somebody would have to look at it and say, okay, how do we apply the building code to this, or do new codes need to be made for this?
Mm.
So once the system is known, so there's the fun in learning the system,
Mm-hmm.
and then once the system is known, Now it's understanding the how far can you push the system,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are all that? The other thing I wanted to mention was I think there is uh, because of the extreme amount of nuances, there is an extreme amount of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a requirement for me to be on my game, attentive in the moment, catching up on things, being able to continuing to learn. It forces me to learn, continue to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fun too for me.
Mm.
Is find and discover new systems. The reason that I like therapy and hypnosis so much is because um, I constantly get to build my own systems,
Mm-hmm.
right? How building houses is something somebody else discovered, is something somebody else did. The building code is stuff that people are like, this is how you build a house,
Mm.
right? Now I go inspect that. Programming, it's this is the language, right? And these are the parameters of the language. You can build within the language,
Mm.
okay, whatever you want, but you're still limited by the language. You're
Yeah.
still limited by the building code. Hypnosis is I am limited by the limits of my own imagination.
Mm.
So when I create constructs for people, I'm actually building systems for them, building new systems for them. And
Mm.
these systems can be bigger, better, brighter than what they've already got built, right? There sometimes people live in a confine of what their imagination or what their limits have enabled them.
Mm.
And we're able to build a bigger system, a bigger construct for them.
Mm.
And that's super freeing. But it's also very um, it's so big that you actually have to kind of like put codes on yourself so you don't get too, crazy and out there. So
There's so much stuff in here. I need to kind of figure out which way to go with it because I
that's
love this.
okay.
Putting codes
Any
on
way you want to
yourself
go. Any way you want to go.
it is also, from the sounds of it, a little bit like you have to create your own building code to be able to function within all of the possibilities that's there.
Right, because the code has to work for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you tell them that it's going to be X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z either doesn't work for them or they can't even imagine X, Y, and Z, right? You take somebody who has severe depression and then you tell them about ecstatic pleasure states, right? They're like, I can't, they can't even imagine it. They can't even fathom it. So you got to take that first step first, and kind of get them to ground level baseline where they're just maintaining as okay. And
Mm.
then you can take them further from there. So you do have to understand a lot of this is going to where people are at.
Yeah.
And helping them, kind of out of the basement, if you will, to
Yeah.
the ground level. Because most people at the ground level are looking for the second floor. Well, on the second floor, looking, they're like, oh, what's in the attic. Most people aren't looking to go down, right? They're not like on the first floor going like, I wonder what it would be like if my life just slipped into the basement, right? We're kind of always heading. We're like flowers, like daisies. We're just trying to,
Trying to get
grow
stuff done.
upwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're growing upwards.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to come back to some of this a little bit later on because you're talking about building systems, and you've got analyzing systems and building systems.
Yeah.
And in analyzing systems, you talked about it being this fun, interesting game. And in the fun, you've talked about it being new and entertaining and the different nuances, and also it's forcing you to learn all the way through it. So it's not repetitive. And you're also having to learn how to push it and find out how you can use this system as you go along.
Yeah.
What kind of interesting is it then when you're analyzing the system?
It's probably a little of that, male competition,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, me against the system.
Yeah.
The system is there. Some of it is exposed to me and some of
Mm-hmm.
it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a little bit of Sherlock Holmesy romanticism going on there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there is a water stain on the ceiling, there's probably a leak above, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we go and investigate further, or are we just going to assume that it's a leak, right? So there is a little bit of guesswork, but it requires educated guess,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Most of these systems that we have, that we live and we breathe, are forgivable,
Hmm.
right? So it's kind of like, well, if you assume something and you kind of just go with it, not much is really gonna happen if you're wrong,
Hmm.
right? Um, because if you run with it, so if I let's take a building system for example, and I say, well, that looks like a leak. I can't tell if there's a leak above it, but it looks like that's a water stain, right? Giving them that information allows them to make the decision on their own,
Hmm.
right? Where I'm not assuming that it's leaking, I'm not assuming that it's not leaking, I'm just saying, hey, this is something you might want to check into. So it's a lot better for me to assume that something is there and
Hmm.
exists than to just say like, no, it's fine, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So this is that fun, that nuance, that forcing to kind of always be on your game,
Hmm.
because if you're not calm, centered, and grounded, your eyes play tricks on you,
Hmm.
right? We don't see things that are right in front of our face.
Hmm.
So this game requires patience. It requires calmness. Requires skill,
Yeah.
and yeah, and just even me referring it to a game, could be just an internal belief system that I believe that what you're going to do for a living, you should love doing. Like, it should never feel like work. It should never be work,
Hmm.
right? It should be um, something that it's something you do,
Hmm.
right? You get paid for it. And, let's face it, money is useful,
Hmm.
right? But if it's something that you have to do every day, and I learned this in school. Spent 3 years in college, and then they're like, "Go do this for the rest of your life," and I'm like, "You couldn't pay me enough to go do this for the rest of my life. That's not happening."
Hmm.
And so I had to analyze why I went in.
Hmm.
Computers were big back in the day. It's like, if you wanted to make lots of money, went into a career in computers and IT and programming. And back when I was 18, 20 years old, money was very important,
Hmm.
right? It was what made the world go around.
Hmm.
um, so basically and I was good at systems, like I said, always have been. And so it made sense, but going in, I understood something even further, right? You have to do what you want to do. You have to do
Hmm.
what's right for you, not
Hmm.
what you think. Again, another system.
Hmm.
System of society, of parental hierarchy.
Hmm.
Everything comes down to a system, and when you can analyze these things, look at them, and see them from a calm, collected point of view, right? You can see now where's the envelope. How do you push the envelope back?
Hmm.
You know, and the better question too sometimes is, do you want to reveal the curtain on the Wizard of Oz? Or do you just want to?
Is
Just
it?
because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Is it still magic if you know how it's done?
Exactly, and I think it can be.
Yeah.
All right, it can be. I've done lots of shows as a hypnotist, right,
Hmm.
behind magicians, and magicians are like, well, you're going to be behind me, so you're going to see how the show how it works. But it's never stopped me from enjoying a magic show,
No.
right? So it's a choice. Knowing how it works is like, okay, I know, but damn, they did that good.
Yeah.
Like, that was really well. That was really well done.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit to me like it's still seeing it like a game. And you mentioned that as this belief system that may be behind a lot of
Oh,
uh,
sure.
the fun and interesting part of it was. Well, there were two levels in it. You talked about the game being skill and patience and being able to keep calm when you were doing it, and at the same time as that, there was this kind of higher belief within you that you know you have to love what you're doing, and if it's a game, it's something you're enjoying doing, it's interesting and it's fun, and you've got all of these nuances within what you're doing. Whereas if it's a job that you have to do that it isn't fun, then suddenly you're not having the same experience anymore.
Yeah, and again, it's what you do. You don't have to love. I just really strongly believe that you should.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe that it's a part of your life, right? We live, we work, we love, we do all these different aspects of our life, and working and having a job is a very big majority for people,
Mm.
right? A lot of people work that 9 to 5. They do that 5 days a week. Some people are, anywhere between 40 to, I've worked with people and they're like, I work 80 hours a week. I'm like, are there even 80 hours in the week? Like, like, oh, that can't be healthy. How long have you been doing that for? And they get used to this, right? And now it's a matter of, well, do you love what you do? Because now I can see, right? Again, everything's a system. It's like if you don't like what you do and you're putting in 80 hours of work because you believe that you have to, it's not good. If you love what you do and you're putting in 80 hours of work, probably still not good, right? Because there's a double-edged sword to everything. Right? I love what I do. I have to have boundaries. Otherwise, I just do it all the time.
Yeah.
So that said, that inner belief really comes down to that's what I need in a job, in a career, right?
Mm.
In order for me to love what I'm doing, my needs have to be met.
Yeah.
Right. So these are obviously things that are needs for me that need to be met in order to do something for long periods of time, long term,
Mm.
and be perfectly okay 15 years from now going like, I, I might cut down what I'm doing, but I'm not going to retire.
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap a little bit around the analyzing systems here.
Sure.
When you're at such a good point about the fact that it is a game and it suddenly fits in your life and what you're doing, because when we started, you said you were good at analyzing and breaking down systems.
Yes.
And then as we talked, it sounds like there are two aspects to it. There's the analyzing the system, breaking it down while you're analyzing it, and then there's building the system up again, or at least doing it in a way that you can explain it to other people.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it can be super freeing to understand the system and then be able to build, if you like, your own system afterwards.
Yes.
So is there a difference for you? No, how can I ask that? That's going slightly the wrong way. I was going to say, do you see it as being something that you're equally good at as both analyzing the system and building the system up? Or is there a difference between the two for you?
No, actually there isn't. Okay. Ooh, good question, actually. Okay. Is there a difference? Yes, only because I don't believe that you can build the system up properly if you don't understand how the system works.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that you have to be really good at breaking the system down and understanding the system, or
Mm-hmm.
you can't do the other piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one is required, one is required before the other.
Yeah.
So breaking the system down and understanding the system,
Mm-hmm.
making the system yours essentially,
Mm.
and then in that way you can actually rebuild the system because you understand the nuances and the concepts enough,
Mm-hmm.
and the extremities and the simplicities of it to build your own,
Yeah.
and also do it in a way that may work better
Mm-hmm.
because it simplifies it.
Yeah.
I think that's my contribution to it, is the ability to simplify
Mm-hmm.
and create a system that generally works for most people.
Yeah.
Right. So if I were to explain a roofing system to somebody, I would know how to explain that so well that it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is. I'm able to explain it to you in a way that makes sense to you. Right.
Okay.
So if somebody's like, yeah, I roofed for a summer, I'm like, okay, I can explain it this way. And we can have that conversation to the
Hmm.
point that maybe they just shingled. They don't know anything about the sheathing.
Hmm.
Right. Well, now I can explain what that is and how that would relate to them so that they would know it.
Hmm.
Right. So now when we're done, doesn't matter who you are, you know how a roofing system works.
Hmm.
Right. So that's kind of, and the only way to be able to do that is to really truly understand how that system works and be able to relate it to things that other people would be able to relate it to.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And the simplifying of the system that you just mentioned
Yeah.
sounds to me to be a new area, if you like. So that the breaking down and analyzing systems has within it this goal of simplifying. Is
Well,
that necessarily true?
the goal, I think that's actually a side effect or benefit, if you want,
Mm-hmm.
because the goal for breaking down the system and analyzing it is for my understanding,
Yeah.
right? So the simplification of it, I think, is just a side effect of my understanding,
Yeah.
right? It's almost like just an added bonus.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, and that's yeah. And so this kind of breaks down to the whole. You've probably heard the saying, if you can teach it, it's a that's a good indication that you know it,
Hmm.
right? If you can teach the subject, it's a good indication you probably know the subject.
Yeah.
And if you can teach the subject well, you probably know the subject, just as well,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of where I think the benefit of understanding it is for me.
Hmm. So if if we were to kind of talk together about some particular system that I didn't understand, you didn't understand at that point, and
Mhm.
you went away and started analyzing it and breaking it down, having fun and enjoying the game as you went along, what's more important for you, that you end up understanding the system or that you can explain it to somebody else?
If I understand the system, I'm automatically able to explain it to someone else.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a kind of, it follows from
Right. But
one to the other.
however, you can't have one without the other. Like obviously, I can't explain to you a system that I don't know very well. And now I can explain it to you as well as I know it in a way that you would understand it equally as well as I know it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the extent.
Okay.
Right. So I have to know something in order to be able to break that down into a way that you would get that and understand that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And then the other thing would be, because the first thing I thought of when you were like, okay, if I don't understand something, you don't understand something, you go away and learn the system. The first thing is the system has to interest me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I I yeah, I don't work for somebody else, so it's like the system has to interest me, right? They're not just like, hey, Chris, go learn this system. I'm like, no, I don't want to. So the system has to interest me in order for me to devote the time and energy into really understanding it, breaking it down. And this is where, like when I write blogs and stuff, I love writing blogs because it gives me a reason to go in and look at something and then look at research that's been done, look at my understanding of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm going into something, so I did one on EMDR, and because I'd heard the term a lot, and as a hypnotherapist, you hear this a lot, EMDR, and I was like, I that's interesting. So I went and researched it,
Mm.
and
I'm just
when
going to
I
stop you a second in case
sure
anyone is watching this video. EMDR is called eye movement desensitization. What's the R for?
Reciprocal or that's a great question.
Hmm.
EMDR, eye movement.
It's desensitization, and I can't remember what the R is.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to cut this out of the video either.
Yeah, no. Well, and obviously I don't do EMDR.
Mm,
One, you have to be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a social worker, if I'm not mistaken. So you
mhm,
have to be one of those in order to do EMDR. Now, interesting enough, what I found was I found lots of information on how to do EMDR, right? And being a therapist, I understand some stuff about the brain and how that works and trauma and everything like that. So
mm,
it was very interesting. I also came across another piece of information, which is EMI, which is actually from NLP. And EMI is eye movement integration.
mhm.
It is not the same as EMDR. In fact, the people who invented EMI specifically say it is not EMDR. However, they also say, and I will go along with this, it works better than EMDR.
Mm,
So, and it's 10 years earlier than EMDR.
mhm.
Also come to find out, there's lots of research on this stuff. I won't get into the
No, because then we'll be getting sidetracked. Um,
hmm But understanding the system, it was something interesting to me. It was something that I felt that I should know. So researching this was, and going down the rabbit hole was really fun. And I came across systems, right? EMI, EMDR, how they work, why they work, what people think that they work. And I'm also able to take in my preconceived understanding of what this is.
mm,
And in doing so, remember that what my preconceived notion was of this, understanding that this is probably somebody else's preconceived notion of this.
mm.
So now I can have that conversation, say, like with you, and just say, okay, no, this is right, and then bring in other aspects. And I'm like EMI. You're like, oh, I don't know what EMI is. Oh, NLP. Like I know what that is. Okay, well, let's talk there. So I know where you're at
Mm.
and where I need to take you, and then we just have this conversation. And all along the way, I'm just making sure that you're right there with me and that you understand this.
Give me a moment.
Sure. Bless you. Oh, you didn't hear that.
Yeah. Corona
Bless you.
safety. I sneezed into my elbow in a different country, so I don't think you can be infected from that.
Bless you. Well, if that was the case, we should be wearing masks. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I want to be a little bit careful that we don't go down a rabbit hole here, because I could talk kind of hypnosis
Same.
world
Yep.
for hours and hours and hours, but that's
Yep.
not actually what we're here to do. I'd
Nope.
like to bring you all the way back, if I can,
Sure.
to this interest. And if we kind of, if I can invite you to just go back into this whole, the interest in me, this the analyzing, that's not English, analyzing.
It's a good word, though.
It is, it's a great word. You know, you're analyzing and breaking down systems that interest you.
Yes.
And it's fun and it's interesting and it's a game.
Yes.
And when it's interesting you and you've got the fun starting to, if you like, appear, what's the first thing that you notice that happens there when this interest starts to kick off and you start to look at the smile? Okay.
This right here. I smile.
Yeah.
I feel myself Kool-Aid smile. And the moment that happens, I know I'm hooked. Like I need to cancel some appointments. I'm going down a rabbit hole. And this is interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then sometimes there's stuff that I'm not interested in, or I think I'm interested in, and then I go in and I will get the smile again when I realize that this is just crap. I'm just like, this is I don't know if you can swear, I'm just bullshit. It's like, this is crap. This is shit. And then I smile and I'm like, where is this going to take me? Because now I'm interested in a different way. Now it's more like the dumpster fire you can't look away from. Right. Now I want to see, like, how bad is this?
Yeah.
Right. So there's both sides, but when that smile hits, I know that I'm in for something.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's pretty much like the first thing. That smile hits and I just get a really, really good feeling that yes, this is fun, this is cool, this is interesting. regardless of what side of the equator you're on that one.
And whether
But
it's a dumpster fire or whether it's
exactly right. It's the I don't know. It might have something to do with why I'm so self entertained. Yeah, it's possible. But yeah, yeah, it's that smile. That smile is the first thing that comes, and then I'm just like, it's interesting. And I've been smiling this entire time because this conversation is really interesting.
yeah, okay. And you mentioned this Kool-Aid smile, and you also said about
Yeah,
that feeling.
yeah.
What kind of feeling is that feeling that comes with a Kool-Aid smile? Or
It's
does it arrive before? Is it the when?
it's the once I notice the smile, that rush, it's like just a rush of pleasure that just runs up the spine. It's excitement,
Mhm,
um the whole newness, like, oh, this is new and it's going to be interesting. The
mhm,
whole I'm learning again,
mhm,
experiencing, having an experience,
mhm,
right? I found something, almost like if you're a kid, you're going outside and you're playing in the sandbox, or you're digging up holes in your mom's garden. And all of a
mhm,
sudden you find something. You don't know what it is yet. You found something,
mhm,
right? That inquisitive, just childish, like, hmm, interesting. And the smile, because again, sometimes it's unexpected.
yeah,
You do a lot of this stuff on whims, right? It's like, oh, EMDR, what's that? Type ask the Oracle, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh,
mhm,
oh, here we go,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
It's interesting that every time you mention it, the smile also then appears on your face. Isn't
yeah,
it?
because I'm remembering,
Yeah.
I'm revivifying.
Mhm,
I'm going back to when I did it in my mind, and yeah, it's revivification is very, very powerful.
yeah. And this Kool-Aid smile that turns up, and you get this rush of pleasure that runs up the spine.
Hmm.
Um, and then you're into newness. And newness was what you mentioned earlier around the fun that has
Yeah,
to be there.
yeah.
So is it fun before it becomes a game? When you're starting to analyze this system, um, is it fun first?
I know. I think it's inquisitiveness first.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I don't know what this is, and I feel like maybe I should. So I'll go look. And there are some times that I'll look something up and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's it's boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and again, I know very quickly, is this something I need to know, right? I'm a firm believer that I can do anything that I want to do. So I'll never say that I can't do something.
Mm.
Instead of can't, I like to say I don't have any interest in doing that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
true,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm okay with that,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to be, you know, I I, I know enough useless knowledge. So knowing what something is and then really knowing what something is, I have to, again, it's all about benefits, right? It's all about positive gain.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a gain for anybody to do anything,
Yeah.
right? So I'm inquisitive just by my nature. So I'll go look something up. And if it strikes my fancy, if I feel that there is a gain in knowing this better than just what the definition is, or how to use it in a sentence, or something like that, then that Kool-Aid smile usually is just right around the corner.
Okay. So the Kool-Aid smile comes after the go look. You've got to. You mentioned the whim
It's
that's there.
inquisitive first. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The inquisitive is usually the whim of, um, that's interesting. Let's know, what is that,
Mm.
right? The lack of knowledge, or the lack of, if I feel it's something I should know, a term, something, I see it being used a lot or thrown around a lot. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Acronyms are the one thing that always get me too. People throw around acronyms all the time. In fact, one of the hypnosis forums, they were talking about wolves, and I'm like, they're like, how do you get rid of wolves? And I'm just like, wait, you garden sheep? Like, and this is a hypnosis form. Like, why are you talking about that? And again, it's a complete, I have no idea what they're talking about. I'm like, usually with a gun, but I don't know if there's laws protecting them. But they're talking about, I haven't looked it up yet, but I was just kind of looking through the comments, and I'm guessing it's something that has to do with like an energy sucker, or somebody who is a very negative person, or somebody
Mm.
who uses other people for their gain. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't looked it up yet, but it was very, just using it as an example, very interesting term. I'm like, well, I've never heard that used before, so I should probably look it up and see what that is. By the way, it's a UK thing,
Hmm. Well,
because
I've no idea what it is, and I've left
yeah,
it.
well, yeah, everybody in the States was like, "Woo," like they had to go Google it and look it up, and I was like, yeah, I'll go do that. I haven't had the chance yet, um, but yeah, the inquisitiveness is there,
Mm.
right? So once I look it up, it's probably going to either be like, oh, okay, that's what he means, or oh, that's really interesting. Like it might open up a wormhole for me, and it's like, oh, what is this? And then I'll look into it more. And as I start looking into it, the Kool-Aid smile comes, or it's just like, yeah, like this is just a term for another thing, and I don't deal with it, or I don't need to deal with it, or it's certain things that I don't need to deal with. There's, you know, you
Okay.
know,
I have an idea. And as we've actually been chatting together for coming up to 40 minutes, very soon, I'd kind of like to have a see if I can explain the idea that I've got, and figure out whether or not that matches a little bit of what you
sure,
talked about.
sure,
Um, so analyzing systems, it all, if you like, I'm going to go process oriented. I'm going to go all the way back to my engineering days and kind of do a flow diagram if I can get it to work.
it does help.
Um, so it actually starts with a whim. It starts, and that could be an acronym, it can be something that you hear about, it can just be an idea that pops into your head, but it starts with a whim
Yep.
where you begin to kind of think, I need to go and look at this. I need to go and explore it, be inquisitive about it. And once you started to do that and you start to get a little bit of information there, the next important step is it interesting? And is it interesting for you isn't actually a rational, I have a list of what I find interesting and not. It's, do I begin to get this Kool-Aid smile that starts to appear on my face when I start to be more inquisitive about this? And
Yeah, it's more of an internal process rather than a conscious process.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when that Kool-Aid smile starts to appear and you start to get more interesting, you actually notice a rush of pleasure. It's something that you can feel within you that comes up your spine.
Absolutely.
And then you're kind of, you're down the rabbit hole and you're into exploring the system. And while you're exploring the system, there are three parts to it, three, if you like, major parts. Of the fact that it's fun to do, that it's interesting, and that it's also a bit of a game. It's a puzzle to be solved. You mentioned this Sherlock Holmes. Now we need to figure out how this thing is going to be working. You talked about the fact that you find it entertaining and it's new, and there are all of these nuances that you have to learn about that kind of push you and forces you to learn something and learn something new within that. And when you're doing it, it's not repetitive either. So, you're not, even though you might be doing something similar when you're looking at it, it's not a repeat. It's not the same thing every time. It's a new thing every time when you're starting to look at it.
Yep.
And that when you're doing it really well, when you're playing this game really, really well, it requires skill, it requires patience, and it also requires calmness.
Hmm.
And you love what you're doing when you're doing it. It's something that gives you a
Absolutely.
great deal
There's
of
no
pleasure.
other, if you don't, you really need to stop.
Yeah. And at the end of it, you actually know whether or not you've won the game, if you like, because you will understand it well enough to be able to explain it. You'll be able to understand it well enough, not just to explain it to another professional, but you'll be able to explain it to Bob from the street that comes in and says, "What's this EMDR malarkey?" or whatever it may be. So
Yeah.
you
So
can explain it in different levels.
so I've won the game when I've made it mine.
Yeah.
Right. When I own it.
Yeah.
right? That's usually when people win games.
Yeah. When they won them.
When they won, yeah, when they
Yeah,
won it,
absolutely.
when they own that game,
Yeah.
right? They can play it backwards, forwards, and everything. They still enjoy it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
So
that was very, very well. Yeah.
yeah. I appreciate that earlier we talked about, I had mentioned that it would be also good to talk about the building systems and the other side of it and looking at doing that. There
Mm.
just isn't going to be enough time to do, to do
Oh
that.
no, that's fine. That's fine.
We kind of gone down the other rabbit hole first. So before we figure out if this is a good place to stop, is there anything else about that process of analyzing systems that has popped up in your head as I've gone through the kind of the flow chart there? Is there anything else that you think is really important that needs to be mentioned?
I can't really think of anything, except for the fact that everything is a system and everything can be looked at as a game,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even like our conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? We roll the dice, decide what we're going to say, how many steps we're going to move, and then it's the
Mm-hmm.
other person's turn to play, right? So everything is a system. Everything can be looked at as a game if that's what you choose to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, I feel like life would be more enjoyable for people,
Mm.
right? I think that they would feel like they have more control as well. Most people don't feel out of control or helpless when they're playing a game.
Depends what games you're playing and who you're playing against, I think.
Well, I mean, it depends on it really depends on what you're playing and who you're playing against,
Mm.
right? But when you realize that it is a game,
Mm.
right? When people turn it into more than a game, again, this brings us back to just because you can doesn't mean necessarily you should.
Mm.
Still, at heart, it's still a game,
Mm.
right? And people lose sight of that,
Mm.
which is why you can have that. Depends on when you're playing and who you're playing with, right? You think, well, like high stakes poker,
Mm.
still a game,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're the one who changed the rules and raised up the stress level of the game. But when it comes down to it, if you were just playing regular poker with me for no stakes, it's a game,
Mm.
right? There's really no need for you to be anything but just relaxed and happy.
Okay, you broke up a bit there. Did you say relaxed and happy? Was that the last thing
Yeah.
you said? Yeah. Okay. So again, rabbit holes, whims, interests, Kool-Aid smiles, all these things can appear in
Yep.
my head at the same time. So a very, very last question before we need to round up.
Sure.
Would you then actually say that what you're really good at doing is playing a game?
Playing the game of games, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Okay.
Why not?
And with that playful way to to finish what we're talking about, is that an okay time for you to stop?
Absolutely, and very, very well done.
Cool.
Very well done.
Well, thanks for your time, and
Thank you.
I will carry on playing games and see where we end up.
You do that. Let me know how that goes.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye, John.